never goes over well at the family meeting when we have agendas. I've told some of you about those stories. For those of you who don't know me as well, my name is Mark Najarian. My wife's back there. She loves the attention, so wave. Hi, Laura. That's Laura Najarian. I'm going to be talking about the Examen prayer and Ignatian spirituality tonight. In about an hour, maybe with question and answer. If that wasn't what you signed up for, please grab your food and go. No, very informal. Also, if there's a burning question, you want to stop me, please feel free to do so. But I will have some time at the end. The format, the reason why we're doing this, as fun as it is, and just excited to see you all here tonight, it's also a requirement, a good old requirement. I'm in my 4th year at the seminary studying to become a deacon. God willing, can't say it's going to definitely happen, but at this point, we're printing invitations and it's probably going to happen. The Archbishop has sent us letters in my deacon class that have been invited to prepare for June 14th. So probably going to happen coming up. But we have a capstone in our 4th year. Any topic we want about spirituality. So not as much of an academic presentation, it shouldn't be. Across, that's more my style, and I apologize, but it's about our spiritual journey, and we are to share it with our community. So we're going to talk, that's the meat of what I'm going to be talking about, but I do want to speak a little bit, well, I'm going to mention the admin stuff. So please help yourself if you haven't. We've got sandwiches over there. Get up while I'm talking, rustle the paper, it's all good. Very informal tonight. So thanks for those that have helped out and brought cookies and helped set that up. I want to talk for just a few minutes about the seminary because you're like, okay, what is a deacon and why is it 4 years and what are you doing? So I would love to talk about that, but I'm going to try to keep it short because that's not the purpose of tonight. So the deacon cross there, first of all, you'll know we have Deacon Mark. He's wearing a deacon cross under there. So I'm a seminarian, I don't have a deacon cross yet, so that's how you can tell. Very confusing in Denver because deacons wear the same black clerics as priests do, and priests don't wear the cross unless you're a bishop. So of course I've already been called father. Wearing this because of the gray hair and I don't look like a seminarian who's 25, a priestly seminarian. But it's a 4-year program, and for anybody, any men over 35 years of age, can jump right into hot button issues and the recent Synod on synodality and recent press from Pope Francis that the topic of women being ordained as deacons is part of something he has in the past suggested would like to be studied, and was again in his most recent writings something that is being considered. Let's put that in the parking lot and talk it at the end if we have time. I also wanted to just mention when I say the seminary, you probably have all driven by. Actually, I have to say for the first almost 20 years of living in Denver, I was like, oh, there's that beautiful campus, and I've never had a reason to go over there. I've never been there for a meeting, and then I didn't realize after I applied and got in, I'm here all the time now. But there is the priestly seminary at the John Paul II, it's the Center for New Evangelization. There is the lay division. Many of you may have taken courses in biblical school, catechetical school, just individual classes, either there at the campus or online. There's the diaconate school, the School for Deacons is the St. Francis School of Theology for Deacons. Then there's a second seminary called Redemptoris Mater, which is the neo-catechetical way, which is that. But so there's 2 seminaries along with the priests as well as the diaconate and that's a quick overview about the seminary. So any just burning questions about, I should probably say, I'll find out in May if I'll be assigned here at Good Shepherd or another parish nearby. Probably about the time we'll be finding out who the new pastor will be here at Good Shepherd. So, would love to be here. Not my decision, and I'll find out in a retreat in May. So stay tuned. So I wanted the meat of the conversation is Ignatian spirituality, specifically getting into the Examen prayer and some of the takeaways in my capstone project. So the first thing I wanted to actually use before I get into what is the overview of the Ignatian spirituality, I wanted to talk about just how I came upon this topic, why it's my capstone. So the first year at the seminary, we went through the spiritual exercises with Father Dennis Brown. Yes, it's Father Brown, not the one from the mystery that you can watch on BBC. He is of the order of the Oblates of the Virgin Mary. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Oblates later. But he's very experienced as a retreat master, goes around the country giving retreats, and he does every first year for the deacons at the seminary. And I was really intrigued by it, and I felt like I didn't do a great job at it. It wasn't as fruitful as I would have liked, but I really identified with the way in which St. Ignatius kind of lays out doing the spiritual exercises. It's typically a 30-day retreat, which most lay people and working people can't afford to take a month off and go be cloistered for a retreat. The way we did it as students was a daily prayer time, at home, but we would meet weekly with our spiritual director, Father Brown, and he would guide us in that. So we basically met weekly with him throughout the semester. Has anyone done, I know I want to put you on the spot, Claudia's done the spiritual exercises, or
I'm just at the end of it now.
You're finishing now. Maria, you've also done the exercises. Anybody else experience with? You have? Did anyone do the full 30 days at cloistered, or more of this modified what we're talking about? Okay. So that is the typical approach. The way I decided that I wanted to do it again in my summer before my last year, Father Brown had given me a book that was a French Jesuit had written called The Spiritual Exercises, a do-it-at-home version. So it was the DIY version of spiritual exercises. I have that book here, which I'll mention later a little bit, but that approach was advisable only because I had done it once before, but it's a little bit more cookie cutter because you just move through the pages, the chapters, the days, the reflections you're asked to do in the order without any direction. The value of having a spiritual director, of course, is you have conversation after your meditation period. They ask you how it's going, and they move you around to different places within the spiritual exercises. So it is truly tailored to the need of the retreatant. That's the idea. So, what is in a nutshell, if I could simplify one slide, what the spiritual exercises are. St. Ignatius would love to go into his historical background and go into a lot of that detail. I don't think we have time. We did read about him. Actually, Deacon Mark led us through our reading circle last month and had a chapter on St. Ignatius. So it was wonderful to go into his story, his history. But as the founder of the Jesuits and the leader of this order, this was his structured way for spirituality. And to boil it down, you're basically using your imagination to put yourself into the scene of a particular thing that you're going to meditate about. So you're using your imagination. You are placed in, let's say, it's one of the nativity scenes at Christmas time. So you put yourself into that scene. What do your senses tell you? What do you see? What do you hear? What do you smell? You know, one of the ones I never thought of, it's always interesting of, use your sense of smell. You know, is it really in, you know, the stalls with the other animals? You know, is it all good? Is it what you smell? But it's how do you physically put yourself there using your imagination. I mentioned that it's 4 weeks. These are roughly the 4 categories, each of those weeks. So there's 7 days. The first week is you're contemplating sin, your sinful life, somewhat of a full general examination of your life, and are you committed to changing? Are you committed to, it's a very pleasant topic, obviously. Are you ready to repent? How do you want to change your life moving forward? The second week is, again, 7 days of specific meditations about the life of Jesus. So his time primarily during his public ministry before the crucifixion. Many of those stories, obviously the transfiguration from today's reading, that's one of the topics that you can take to prayer during your spiritual exercises. And use your imagination to put yourself into that. I only gave it one bullet. It's another whole series of books about discernment of spirits, discerning God's will. It's a big thing for Ignatius. Again, he's organized, he's structured. He has not one but 2 sets of rules about discerning spirits. So the first set of rules is 14. The second set of rules is 8, and basically they are how are you discerning God's will? Are you in a place of consolation or a place of desolation? Just to give you an idea, if you're in a place of consolation, enjoy that. Don't always count on it and think that you're going to always be in consolation, because you're always in this rhythm of ups and downs through life. And so he has these very structured rules about what to do when you're in a point of consolation or in a point of desolation. The second set of rules is, again, a little bit more about discerning God's will, discerning of spirits, and probably another whole conversation about the specifics of that. Any questions about just that quick overview? Just wanted to get into Examen prayer a little bit more. So, I should say that, in all humility, I wanted to do this, and the director for this class was like, well, this isn't going to work, because we're to do a project that will help us with our long-term spirituality. What are you going to do that's going to be a perpetual practice? It's like, well, you want to do it again, but that's just 30 days, so how is that your permanent? And I, in a very humble way, was hard-headed and said, well, I just want to do this. I don't know, maybe watch this video and should chuckle, because he was right. And I stumbled upon what I really needed, which was the Examen prayer. So through the daily spirituality, your daily set of meditations and contemplations and spiritual exercises, you do a review of your day. You do the Examen prayer, a daily examination of conscience or consciousness, depending on who you talk to. So the Examen prayer was something that I realized during the midst of my 30 days this past summer, that I said, oh, I haven't been doing a very good job of this, and it has a huge amount of value, and this is what my topic should be. So it's one of those, you get into a research paper and then you change the title and you change your conclusions and all. Well, kind of like that, but definitely want to say that I didn't plan it, but it happened, which I'm very, very thankful for. So what is the Examen prayer? There are 5 steps. You could probably Google and find these words or another version of these 5, but it's not necessarily these exact words. So, first of all, take 15 minutes to do it. This is not an hour, this is not 30 seconds, it is 15 minutes, and in multiple places. Ignatius, this was for his novitiates, the trainees to become Jesuits. He wanted them to do about a quarter of an hour in multiple places in his writings. So this gives you a flavor for how much time you should spend. Preferably more than once a day, but at least once a day. So over the course of 15 minutes, first one's easy to remember. Give thanks to the Lord our God. You're so tempted to jump to number 3 because you're going to do a review of your day. So I just forget that other stuff and I'm just going to jump to. So let's give thanks for our life, whatever challenges we may have. We'll give thanks for everything in our lives, the gift of life. Number 2 is also easy to skip over, but ask for the grace to know my sins. The way I say this is, help me to see myself from a different perspective. Before I start doing my hour by hour, God, help me see myself through the lens of your eyes, through other people's eyes, not how I think I see myself, which, that's good or bad. But let's just say, help be able to see myself in a way to grow, to love you, to serve you, but to grow. Okay, then you jump into the hour by hour. Now, I approach this the way all of you would if you're hearing this for the first time. Oh, okay, well, this is just going to be just walk through the day and stumble upon that thing that you didn't do so well and say, that was bad, I was bad, and I shouldn't do that anymore. That's my review. That is a way to do it. That is a way I have treated it, but that's not the best way to do the Examen. You are looking you're looking for discerning God's will for yourself, right? You are looking at your day in the context of everything that you have experienced and how you can learn from it. But it's not a punishment based, like, oh, I did this bad thing. It helps, I do it, and I think, oh, but why did I do that? How can I, what would have been a better thing? How can I live, as a follower of Jesus, as a Christian, and have done, better today? Of course, you ask God for pardon for all my faults, so there's a sense of, asking for forgiveness, which is a beautiful part of this, part of your daily kind of cleansing, and then resolve to amend my ways. So this is obviously a critical step. It's not a review. You got to that point of like, oh, I had that moment. I want to. This is really my focus. I want to be this way or that. But there's a resolution here of that repentance and want to do better. And then I've got a thurible over there that, for instance, the idea that your prayers are the symbology of smoke, right, is rising up to God. That's why we have incense in the Mass. Well, also because back in the day people didn't always get to shower, and so it was good to have this beautiful incense smell, especially at the end of the Camino, right? In Compostela, they have this really big one that people really smell after weeks on the trail. But the smoke is rising up and taking your prayers to God. Any questions about these 5? Because this is really the heart of what the Examen is. As a definition.
When you're such a review of the day hour by hour, are you reviewing specifically to figure out what you did wrong, or to reflect on that, or are you also like comments that maybe you did that were in accordance with.
Yes,
what God
yeah,
wants.
thank you for that clarification, because I said it's not just about what you did wrong, it's both. You're absolutely right. And maybe resolve to amend my ways is how do I do more of those things that I realized was what God was calling me to do during the day. Yes, thank you, Daphne, that's great clarification. Bob, you had a question, and then Maria?
That's pretty similar to her question.
Yeah. Yes, Maria?
Well, I'd like to just make a comment.
Yes.
I think you did it very well, explanation. Number 3, the idea also is to kind of, you are an observer of what has happened to you during the previous day or the previous hour or the previous morning. And, asking God for the grace to see things that you might not be able to see, or something that sometimes we're blinded to a lot of things, and asking God to be there, with you through the hour, through that day or whatever. That really, I think that is a very powerful thing. And to be an observer, meaning that you are not judging what you did, it's just you're asking God to really shed light into that so that you can see it more clearly.
Yes. No, thank you for that clarification. That's very helpful. I did want to share a quick anecdote of humility with my spiritual director, Father Brown, when he shared with the group. He's a little older than I am, and he said, most people like to do their examen in the evening, but he's fresher, he does it in the morning. I was like, oh, he's an older guy, he probably falls asleep, But I mean, you really want to do it that evening because, it's fresh from the day. Okay, yeah, I fall asleep. So I was like, oh yeah, I'm just like him. I have to do it in the morning because if prayer position is usually lying down, close my eyes, want to spend a few minutes thinking about the day, and I'm out. So just wanted to share. Everyone has their own approach as to what how they do it, but just in all humility, I was somewhat chuckling when he said that's how he did it, and that's exactly where I landed. Okay, this is maybe, yes?
Sorry, just a very quick question. With the detail of going in hour by hour, I wonder if Ignatius ever had any direction as far as is it a written thing? Is it really meant to be without?
Yes.
Any kind of documentation, or
No,
up to the person?
That's a great question. It's up to the person. Some people really flourish with journaling. They want to go back and see where they've been. I think for St. Ignatius, it was more about the 15 minutes, whether you're journaling or not. But it's not that hour by hour, and you get into the weeds. You could easily be 30, 45 minutes, and it's like, no, it's too much. So your choice on journaling, but stick to the 15 minutes. 15 minutes once, twice, 3 times a day, and that's where I wanted to go with here, about the discerning of God's will. So these are maybe some conclusions that I was drawing, not just the 15 minutes, but I had a conversation with Father Curran. Some of you may know he's the priest who subs in for Father Jim, usually once or twice each weekend. Sometimes in the morning, 8:30. We also will do the noon mass every so often. He's a Jesuit instructor up at Regis University, and I just kind of mentioned to him, hey, I'm going to be talking about Ignatian spirituality. Well, so he is like a Jesuit educator. I don't want to say I regretted it because he focused me on, and I actually read one of the articles that is very famous in kind of academic circles for Jesuit and Ignatian spirituality. Like you need to read, Father Aschenbrenner. This was a 1972 article, and I was like, oh boy, this is gonna get. But what Father Kern was saying is there's a difference between conscience and consciousness. So when you talk about examination of conscience, you're thinking about, oh, I'm going to go into confession, right? I'm preparing for reconciliation. That's not what Father Curran sees as really the examen. And he's drawing from this very famous Jesuit, Father Ashenbrother. He talked about the examination of consciousness. The idea is that you are looking to this, you want to get to pray always, right? We've heard that term. Well, what does that mean? Well, if you are doing the examen, you are discerning God's will. If you do it more than once per day, actually Ignatian suggested maybe at midday and then again in the evening, so at least twice, you're doing it more frequently. And this continuum of, well, how, is everything I do throughout the day something that I'm discerning God's will? Like should I go over there and get a cookie? Probably. But I mean, to that level of like everything I do, am I discerning God's will? And this was my interpretation. I've heard that term, the need to learn to pray always. And the more we are discerning God's will, as opposed to the other side, which again I'm guilty of, like, okay, I did my morning liturgy of the hours and I got my 15-minute in and I reviewed yesterday and boom, that's done. Now I can go on with the day because that's compartmentalized and that's that one thing I do in the morning, and then the rest of the day I'm a different person because I checked the box. And the idea for pray always and discerning God's will on a constant basis is how do you do that? How do you do that throughout the day without becoming immobilized because everything you do is like, wait, I need to stop and think about it. But how do you internalize that? That's really what this idea of discerning God's will and having an examen that you have incorporated into your daily life. And again, please hear me. I'm talking about it. I'm not there. I'm not an expert. I've spent some time with it this summer and I'm continuing to do the daily examen, but I'm not like Father Brown or like Father Curran, who is a Jesuit. Which is important for me to convey that. I see this as advancement in the spiritual life. And that's what we were asked to do. And so if anything, if I can say I've been successful, is I can see where we're supposed to go. We, not just me, right? Where we are supposed to go on this idea of growth in spirituality on a daily basis. And how do we discern God's will? So what were my experiences and takeaways? I've kind of already gotten into that a little bit, but maybe these are more of that practical takeaways. So the spiritual exercises are a big investment of time. I don't expect people tonight, they're so excited about this, they're going to take a sabbatical from work and go sign up for a 30-day retreat somewhere. If you have time, great, do it. But what else can you do that is not that level of an investment in time? The Lanteri Center is a local resource. We are blessed in Denver to have a group that specializes in spiritual direction here in Denver. There are offices just on the north side of downtown. I've had the luxury through my time at the seminary to have priests be a spiritual director. I mentioned Father Brown, and then another priest that currently is seen on a monthly basis. But as always, there's not enough priests to provide spiritual direction for everybody. But you don't need a priest if you have someone who's really good and trained in spiritual exercises. The Lanteri Center specializes in training lay people to be directors for spirituality. I have not use one of them, but I have friends at the seminary, both my year and one guy who is actually in the class of 2027, that have not only used the Najarian Center. One of them is a trained spiritual director, and I just want to point that out as if it's something you want to do and you want to slowly explore it, and it's not because you want to just read the books that I'm talking about on my own, but you want to meet with somebody. They don't just randomly assign whoever's next up in the queue. I found out that they do kind of an interview or an entrance interview to seek out what you are looking for, and then they try to match you up of, kind of personality wise and what your needs are with someone who could be a spiritual director, either doing the spiritual exercises, Ignatian spiritual exercises, or some type of modified whatever you may need at this point in time. Not everybody just jumps right into, like I said, modified 30-day retreat. I've already talked about it, but obviously how I stumbled in, whether it was humility or hard-headedness, but how I stumbled into this is really what I needed to be doing in my project, and that's the daily examen as part of your daily prayer routine, whether that's once, twice, or 3 times a day, whatever works for you. And then on top of that, this may be an obvious one. We do a good job here in this parish with the reading circle or other groups that read Holy Scripture, read theological texts, but it really enhances your prayer life. That is, if you are just constantly only in your own thoughts and only in prayers and then have other activities, you're missing out on a lot of what the church has to offer for throughout all the centuries of great writers, great theologians, that in the book that we just read with the reading circle, we had 15 different saints and theologians across all the centuries, depending on what appeals to you. So if you are looking for advice on books to read, I'm probably not the best person, but between Deacon Mark and others here who I know are very well read, we can maybe match you up with the right person here in the parish to help guide you on what's the next book. But the Bible's probably not a bad place to start. I would put a pitch in for the Ignatian. The Ignatius Press has a Bible that just came out completely with all of the annotations. So it's twice as long. It's this huge version of the Bible, but it's because the lower page has got annotations for all of the Bible passages, and I think it's really valuable. If you're intimidated by reading scriptural text because you don't know what's going on, you don't have all of the history, but having that Ignatius Press version of the Bible that has all of those notes that can tell you, not only just cross-reference, but here's a quick blurb of this is why this reference is because of this, right? So that really is helpful. Any questions about takeaways? How we doing? Good. All right. That was the meat of it. We can't talk about the Jesuits without other stuff going on, which can get a little feistier if we move into history and modern Jesuits in the modern world. And then I'm going to wrap up with some specific books that I used in my project and whether I recommend them or not. But but you're probably thinking, why are we talking about spirituality? The Jesuits, aren't they the educators? They're the missionaries that went all around the world. Yes, but St. Ignatius was first known for his spirituality that he developed and the rules, and then the Jesuits quickly moved into these other arenas, right? So we know them as missionaries, Asia, South America, North America. A little bit of my research, Brazil is the largest Catholic nation in the world, and the Jesuits were the first ones in what is now Sao Paulo or Rio, right? They helped build the communities there that have now become these huge cities in Brazil. The Jesuits quickly surpassed kind of the original mendicant orders. You think of the Franciscans or the Dominicans back in the 1200s, 1300s as maybe the most famous. But by the 1600s, certainly by 1700, the Jesuits were the largest order of priests. We think of them, and again, I'm just glossing over like huge topics, right? A bullet on, educators as Jesuits, but my suggestion here, scientists and mathematicians debunking the misconception of science versus religion. If you run across people that say, oh, you believe in creation, you believe in God, so, I believe in science, and that's over here, and, those are separated as, good, faithful Catholics, and say, no, it's both and, right? That we have, we believe that God created the universe, and we believe that we need to study and learn. We believe in science and medicine, and that there are these wonderful physicists and mathematicians that are also saints in the church. That's also a history of the Jesuits. And then, of course, I mentioned some spirituality, but not just for the Jesuits. What I was fascinated to learn is that there are other orders who kind of prescribe this Ignatian spirituality, but they're their own order. So the best example, I've already mentioned, the Oblates of the Virgin Mary. They are the ones that, actually Father Brown, who was my director, is an Oblate, and the Lanteri Center, their founder is very involved in the spiritual exercises, and Bruno Lanteri, and they are again big followers of Ignatian spirituality, their own order. My favorite example, though, is St. Francis de Sales. We just read a little bit about him in the reading circle. So he was a priest and became bishop in Geneva, I believe. So a diocesan priest, but he went through a Jesuit education, right? He went to a Jesuit high school, college, and had a spiritual director who was Jesuit. So then when you read his book, Introduction to the Devout Life, it was a series of letters that he wrote for lay people. But if you take some of the chapters out that are very specific to the meditations that he was advising, they were almost carbon copies out of the spiritual exercises. It's like, oh, because that was his upbringing, that's where he came from. He identified with that Ignatian spirituality, even though he was not a Jesuit priest. So, love that example. And then finally, and this is, we'll see how much time and where these bullets take us. I just said Jesuits in the modern world, and wanted to talk about a few topics that are what we think of today in the 21st century. So certainly Jesuits are educators. I've got Regis University up there. Father Curran, who I mentioned earlier, is instructor there. Almost 200 Jesuit colleges and universities around the world. We've got Jesuit high schools here. We sent our son to Regis Jesuit. When you say Catholic social teaching, some people get revved up a little bit about that. In fact, at the end of one of our reading circle meetings, I said, I'm going to be talking about this if anybody wants to come. And the other individual said, well, the Jesuits are great, but, they get too far into that Catholic social teaching. And I can't put my finger on it, but I think we get often in a place where we start comparing our church and the teachings of the church and different beliefs, and on a comparable plane with politics. We're not gonna do tonight. Easy for us to fall into, right? But like, oh, well, there's the conservatives and the liberals, politically, there's conservatives and liberals in the church, and the Jesuits are liberals. And it's this easy jump, which I'd say, please don't do, of saying, oh, well, the Jesuits are, they're the educators and they're liberals, and they prescribe to all this Catholic social teaching, and they're too focused on that. How can you be too focused on Catholic social teaching? It's basically a lot more details about corporal works of mercy, which, we're all called to do. So just be aware that can be a lightning rod for some when you talk about the Jesuits. So that's what I say. It also spills over into this conversation. Yes, we're all one big Catholic church, unified. You've got your traditionalists and liberals as it relates to the language of the Mass. Is it in Latin, or is it in your vernacular? Should the priest be facing the tabernacle, or should the priest be facing the congregation, which was after Vatican II? Those are lightning rods, right, for people who are like, this is the right way to celebrate. And just be aware that the Jesuits get pushed into this liberal from a church perspective category. I have had, I kid you not, some of you may have this experience. People say, yeah, you used to go to that Jesuit parish right now, but then their Jesuits aren't Catholic, right? So you also go to a Catholic church. And they're like, no, wait, what? So there are really well-meaning people out there who believe that Jesuits are not Catholic. So sorry to shock you if you're hearing about that for the first time. The thought here when I brought up traditionalists and liberal, where different parts of the country, different parishes, these are really, really important issues. And however you celebrate, go to the parish or embrace the type of liturgy that you like. The slippery slope gets you to this point if you ever say or hear someone say, well, the way that we celebrated at Good Shepherd is right, but this parish over here, that's wrong. Or they're not really celebrating because they do it differently. If it's canonically approved, guess what? It's just as good as whatever you prefer. And I think we get into, or some of us can get into this, if it's different, if it's not what I'm accustomed or what I like, then it's not as good. And that's a trap to get in, that we all need to get into. And then the last thing I wanted to mention, Pope Francis is Jesuit. I can remember growing up, people saying that, because the Jesuits are so liberal, there will never be a Jesuit Pope, which changed in 2013. We just celebrated the Pope's 12th anniversary of his papacy. I'll credit Deacon Mark for one of our meetings a year or two ago, and he asked us here, the Ringing Circle, he's like, what's the purpose, what is the primary purpose of Pope? And we all raised our hands, and we all said things, and I don't think we were quite answering what he was looking for, but his answer was unity, right? The Pope is there for unity. The Pope has to wrestle with whether he's Jesuit or not. Let's say he's the most, conservative of, believes in the Latin Mass and different other things that, some people would say, oh, that's way too conservative. Whichever way, the Pope's role is to make this universal church as unified as possible. When we start talking about we're gonna we wanna have our own church that does it this way, cause this is the way we like it, well, that's how schism starts, right? Like, oh, I'm not part of the universal church anymore. I believe that we should celebrate this way. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention as far as much as I love the spiritual exercises, how St. Ignatius has enlightened me to the Examen prayer, helping me with spirituality in my journey, and I hope all of you as well, your spiritual journey. Know that there's this other baggage that goes along with it. When you say, oh, it's Jesuit spirituality, and if you're an educator, some people believe in this form of education in these schools, and others say that's not even following our Catholic tenets, and you can get it can devolve quickly. And I would just say, you get into those conversations, be respectful, remember we're all part of the same church, and what are we being called to have conversation and love our brothers and sisters, and not let it become divisive, certainly. I hope and request. Any questions on that? Actually, you know what? I bet we'll have some questions. So I want to quickly just mention the books that I read as part of this, and we're getting close to the 1 hour mark. And then we'll come back and just open it wide open for questions. So, this is funny. The first thing I give you is a book not to read. So, this is the most popular translation of the spiritual exercises that we got for our class. It's 1951 translation. And this is what the retreat director would use if you go on a 30-day retreat. So I only bring it up in case you see this book and like, oh, it's a spiritual exercises. It's like, this is the original. I want to read that. It's really difficult if you haven't done it before and you're not a spiritual director, right? That's what the director may be using. It's great to read if you want to just see what it's about, but don't expect to be able to do the 30-day retreat on your own without a spiritual director. This was the one that I mentioned, this do it at home retreat, aka the DIY spiritual exercises. I enjoyed it because I didn't have a retreat set up, but I wanted to do 30 days of contemplations on my own. But I felt confident because I had already done the 30-day with a spiritual director. So maybe that's the advice here. If you are interested in this at some point, maybe after you've spent some time with either a spiritual director at the Laetare Center, or you've gone on an Ignatian retreat before doing that. This would be the highly recommended. So one of those oblates, Father Gallagher, he really boiled the Examen prayer down to, it's a 100-page book, font's pretty big, easy to get through. And he uses case studies of people as a way for us to learn. So he'll, fictitious names, but people that he has guided over the years, and wants to tell their stories, some of the anecdotes, as he's teaching about the Examen prayer. So I like that. As just part of my research, this is kind of a fun thing. I say more for apologetics. If you want to talk about, hey, the Catholic Church, it's not all that bad. How the Catholic Church built Western civilization. Pretty cool book. Just some of that research about who was astronomers and scientists. And if you haven't had a history class in a while, it's pretty interesting to see going way back how the church was heavily involved in Western civilizations and culture. I'm not going to talk about Catholic social teaching. I have this one here. Everybody wants to get further into that, but I'll finish with this one, which was maybe one of my favorites. I haven't talked about it, but it was tied to this idea of how I landed on the spiritual exercises. And that is, this book talks about personalities and temperament. So we all took the Myers-Briggs assessment, and based off of your temperament, many people have an aptitude for different types of spirituality. So St. Thomas Aquinas, who's Thomistic spirituality, Franciscan, St. Francis of Assisi, and then Ignatian. I am not shy, as you've probably seen. I'm an ESTJ. I'm kind of bossy. All those things. It's like, oh, ESTJs, do take to Ignatian spirituality. So that's how I kind of landed on, oh, my own temperament placed me more with Ignatian spirituality. It's not a catch-all, and in fact, there's, sometimes the flip can work, which is, if you have a certain personality, but you need to stretch, maybe trying something different, a different type of spirituality might be good. So it's not a one-size-fits-all, and that's where the spiritual directors come in and be able to say, hey, maybe if you're having some staleness in your prayer life, that you should try something different, a different approach, read a different book, different type of spirituality. So I think that's it. Yeah. So we are at 7:10, so getting close to that hour. Cookies and food, please. You don't want to take it home. At this point, just wanted to open it up for any questions about anything we talked about.
Can I just mention,
Yes,
Mark,
please, Claudia.
I'm in my 4th week of the exercises, but for mine, it's been like months. It started in September, and I'm just at the last week now, so each week can last, 7 or 8 weeks. And for me, I needed that, because I couldn't absorb it all so fast. And I never heard of the 4-week, month-long one until tonight.
Right. So the idea for a 30-day retreat is, again, you are immersed, and this is all you're doing. So yes, you have that time. Your retreat director says go, and instead of you taking a week for each day, you have all day. You are reflecting and praying on the topic that you were asked to reflect on. So it's condensed in the sense that it's not the 6 months, which is the way that we did it my first year, but you have that no distractions if you're in a cloistered retreat environment.
I guess I did hear that, but the thing for me is like, what is it called, SEAL, spiritual exercises in everyday life. So I needed that time after my hour in my green chair to go out there and try to be that person, like instead of going, oh, check that box. And an hour, like the first time she's like, well, you have to pray for an hour. I'm like, I can't pray for an hour, how am I gonna do that? And now it's like 2 hours, I'm still sitting there and I'm totally engrossed. And then one other thing I wanted to say was, I've taken it through Regis. Some of you might remember Nora Lawler. She was a parishioner here. And she had taken the exercises, and she just randomly told me about it. And I was in a place in my life where I really needed some help, and that's kind of why I went. And it's been wonderful. So I just wanted to let people know there's also availability at Regis.
Thank you for sharing that, Claudia. I'm passing out to truly make it a formal process reviews. So do your dirtiest on a evaluation form. Please put your name, don't put your name, whatever you feel comfortable with. But that's part of the process. And yeah, any other questions? Yes. Maureen.
Was there ever a beginning of the
well, I mentioned that the first one I feel like I did a great job, and so I think you call that yeah, 10. We have 10. There's a lot of talk in the spirituality world about dryness, eating that wall. I'm not receiving the clear direction from God as to what I should be doing. So if you think of it as you're putting yourself in this environment where, oh, I'm doing this structured thing every day for 30 days or 6 months, depending on your format. And if you're not getting much out of it, then it can be frustrating. I think that happens to all of us. And of course, there's always that, there's a perseverance element. There are the rules that I referred to earlier, the rules of discernment, spirits from Ignatian, which would say, don't change things dramatically, even if you're having a drive-through, persevere. But if you start changing things, what was the reason that things shifted? Was it because I'm doing a better job with this? Did you focus more? Was there some other environmental conditions? So, but the short answer is, sure, there's always going to be those times where you're like, why am I doing this? I don't feel like I'm bearing any fruit. You're advised to push through it, right, and continue doing. Thanks for asking for that. It's not a foolproof. Do these exercises. Your life is going to change and everything's going to be better, right? We're always trying to put ourselves in a better position so that we can improve our spiritual life. I don't expect everyone to have necessarily want to do Ignatian spirituality, just as we talked about. It can be by temperament, right? There's a subset of people in the room that'll be like, no, I don't want any part of this, right? I want to do something more Franciscan or Thomistic, but definitely wanted to share more in my story. Great. Deacon Mark.
Does St. Ignatius have anything to say in the exercises that helps us discover sins that we may not be aware of?
You're supposed to ask him some questions.
But in the Examen, you're often, it's introspective from your own point of view. And at times, you need to have, as you said, sort of an external viewpoint. So Ignatius, to what extent is in the exercises, does he help us try to be a little bit more objective about our own self-examination of sin?
Yes. I think there's multiple opportunities for that. Obviously, the Examen we talked about, that second point of, God help me see myself through your lens and not how I see myself. This is a time of introspection and spiritual growth and challenging yourself, and that may be what's needed to get to a point where you think about things that you've suppressed at some point in your life. I would say maybe, to answer your question though, maybe more valuable than do-it-yourself exercises is that if you have a spiritual director that can maybe ask some of those probing questions that might help you get there. Some people enjoy having a spiritual director who's also their confessor, which isn't necessarily your parish priest. So these are all different functions, but if you have someone who you go to confession with, some of these topics may come up as well. If you're allowed to confess something and that priest knows you well enough to say, have you also, take this to prayer, not just you're there for absolution and boom, out as quick as possible, but if it's in the environment of a spiritual direction as well, you can ask questions that your spiritual director may be able to guide you in a way. Where I get out of my comfort zone and am not obviously a counselor is when you say, gee, something that I haven't thought about or have been suppressed, are you starting to get into grounds where maybe, professional counseling might be needed, right? Because that's a different discipline than a spiritual director. So, I'm not sure if that's where you were.
Yeah, I think the mentioning of spiritual, this is not an approach that you can do entirely DIY. I mean, the spiritual
Yes.
direction's a critical part.
Right. And so, I guess I would just finish the thought there, when I mentioned the Planetary Center having a spiritual director. You don't have to have a finite duration for your time with a spiritual director, or specifically walking through the Ignatian exercises. That could be that interview or that initial meeting that I mentioned where they pair you up with somebody could be as simple as, what are you looking for? How long, where are you trying to grow in your spiritual life? And they might pair you up with someone who can help you, whatever those goals might be. But it may not be just what Claudia and I were talking about, of like, oh, we're gonna do, this very, clear box of the spiritual exercises, and whether you do it in 30 days or 6 months or somewhere in between, but this is kind of all we do. Spiritual direction, as Deacon Mark is guiding us to think about, is there to help you go where you need to go. And that obviously is different for all of us. Great. Well, I think we're at that. Thank you very much. Please take food with you. Look forward to seeing you all. And I don't know if this is too bold. Deacon Mark and Father Jim have said they're going to host a reception for me after ordination. So mid-June, either here or in the GFC, but it's Father's Day. So that's Sunday, June 15th will be my first Mass here and a reception. So we'd love to see you all there. So thanks for the support.
How did you like this?
It was good.
Oh, yeah.
I'm bleeding here.
I'm great.
Some